Welcome to episode 35 of ECTEL Bytes. The show is a production of the Eastern Caribbean Telecommunications Authority, and I'm your host, Coretta Crooks-Charles, ECTEL's Communications and Media Relations Manager. Thank you so much for joining us. If it's your first time watching, then I'll take a moment to remind you of why we created this space. It's to provide you, our viewers, with information about developments taking place in electronic communications by the Directorate and like-minded organizations. Our special guest is no stranger to ECTEL Bytes. In fact, he was here just last year, February 2025. It's Mr. David Cox. Welcome back to ECTEL Bytes, Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Coretta.
Okay. So February 1st marked 2 years since you assumed the role as Managing Director of ECTEL. Looking back, what have been the most defining moments of your tenure so far?
Wow, there have been a lot of things that have really stood out to me, but I would say that the development of ECTEL's strategic plan was one of those things that marked a real milestone for us over the last 2 years. We have been operating for the last 26 years without a strategic plan. We've been guided, of course, by the treaty and the Telecoms Acts, and therefore the development of our work plans has been guided by the needs of the countries and also the changes in the market. But the fact remains that the absence of a strategic plan to help us look forward, to help us project ourselves into the future, was a major inhibition, I think, for us as an institution. And so the process of getting the strategic plan together, getting it developed, and finally on the verge of being approved by the Council of Ministers marks one of those things that I'm very proud of. I think the team should be very proud. And in particular, what's exciting about it is that it sets the framework for ECTEL's development and transformation for the next 5 years. And the key sort of outcome that we're looking for is to set ECTEL up for the next 25 years. So it's a 5-year plan, of course, meaning that the specific activities under the 5-year plan will take that period of time. So it's not something that we implement all in one go, all over 1 year. The activities are spread out over 5 fiscal periods. But by the end of that period, ECTEL should be a much stronger, much more complex, much more agile institution that is going to be more effective for the consumers that we're working on. So I would have to say that working on that was one of the things that I think defines the last 2 years. And of course, working with this team, for me personally, is always exciting. I'm always excited to come in and to interact with everyone, to see what everyone is doing, and to try to solve problems together. So I would say those two.
I'm smiling because you're being consistent. Last year, I listened back to the interview, and that was one of the things you mentioned, working with the team. So that means it wasn't a lie. Okay, when you first came in, you had a vision for where you wanted ECTEL to go. How close are you to that vision today?
I would say we're on track. So the things that were really important to me was get the strategic plan developed, get us back into a physical location all under one roof, work on improving efficiency for us, work on improving and changing and transforming our culture to make us as strong as possible, and getting our budgeting on track in a very specific way. And I would say we've really done well in those areas. We've made significant progress on relocating our headquarters. We've made tremendous progress on the budgeting aspects. Of course, I just talked about the strategic plan. We've made real strides in the area of efficiency and on culture, which is something which is really important for the success of any organization. That takes time, because when we're talking about culture, we're talking about people, we're talking about changing behaviors, we're talking about change. And that's always a very complex and a difficult thing to achieve. But we're making progress in every key asset, every key facet, in every key sphere of activity where people are concerned. We're making deliberate and specific strides, which I think will mean that in a few years, we'll be right up to fighting weight. So I'm really proud of the progress we've made. We're on track also, I think, which is important. We haven't lost focus on the things that we're trying to achieve. So culture remains very important for us. Getting back to work remains very important for us. Efficiency is very important for us. And, just as a general point to note, it's always focused ultimately on transformation. ECTEL is in a process of change as an institution. And so transforming to become the kind of institution that we need to be for the next 25 years is really the driving force behind all of the changes and the priorities that we're focused on at the moment.
Okay. So leadership in a regional regulatory environment comes with unique challenges. What has been the most complex issue you've had to navigate?
Well, the most challenging issues for us as a regulatory institution is really regulation, right? We're here to ultimately serve consumers, and we do that by partnering with the NTRCs. Fundamentally, we're here to support the NTRCs. That's why we exist. The NTRCs are on the front lines of trying to address the issues for consumers that really matter to them. And broadly speaking, it's an oversimplification, but broadly speaking, we want to solve three problems for consumers. And those problems are high prices, limited choice, and poor quality of service. So broadly speaking, ECTEL's always working on those three things in one way or the other. And regulation takes time, and sometimes the public doesn't understand that. Because we can't regulate off the cuff. We can't regulate in the absence of information. We can't regulate in the absence of study. We can't do it purely for political considerations, nor can we do it based on how we feel about a problem. We've got to investigate, we've got to get data, we've got to assess and analyze the data. And so working on those problems of improving quality of service is a long-term engagement. That's not something you do overnight. Also, working on prices, getting prices right for consumers, whether it's for mobile services, whether it's for, voice-related services or for mobile broadband. Those things, again, take time. And of course, fixing consumer choice, giving consumers options when they're unhappy with their service provider. Again, those things are complex because we're talking essentially about making sure that there's competition in the market, and we need to make sure that there's fair competition. And on prices, the public would simply tell you, well, lower prices, make the service as cheap as possible. But we have to remember, we have companies operating in these markets, and they need to be profitable. It needs to be worth their while to be in these markets, to make as much money as they reasonably should, because that's what enables them to invest in newer networks and new services tomorrow. So solving these problems is never straightforward. And that's, I think, ultimately the most challenging aspect of being in charge of an organization that is really responsible for solving those problems for the public. But it's a challenge, and it's exciting, and it's interesting, and those things are things that we're making progress on. And I think in the coming year or two, we'll begin to see some of the specific initiatives and steps that we're taking to address some of those very problems. So it is a long-term challenge, but I think we're up for it, and we will see the results soon.
Okay. Okay. So we talk a lot about digital inclusion, and in fact, on January 28th, ECTEL launched the findings of the Digital Inclusion Survey. So it's a two-part question. In simple terms, what does digital inclusion mean for families, students, and small businesses in our region?
Well, it's critically important, right? I mean, we need to ensure that people have access to digital services. And access means more than just about price. It also means quality and dependability, reliability of service, and different types of services, right? But broadly speaking, we're talking about connectivity, making sure that people can work, go to school, do their personal transactions online, and live to the extent that they want to live their lives in an intentional way through, making getting access to digital services. Sometimes that's banking. You want to be able to make a transaction. It's hugely impactful. Just imagine the number of people and the amount of efficiency that we're achieving every day when people can make major transactions in their banking lives without having to stand on a line or leave their workplace, drive to a bank, and wait for sometimes an hour or two in order just to get to a counter to make one transaction. So those things are usually impactful. Being able to make purchases online, those things are usually impactful. And of course, using digital services for more than just entertainment purposes is critically important, for educational purposes, to advance your business. We are now in an age where you don't need to spend a huge amount of money to advertise on a television station or a radio station in order to get attention for your business. You can go online, you can market online, and your business can be engaged by partners or customers or clients that are international. If you can provide the service, let's say that you're a design firm, that you're providing architectural services, you can be engaged by clients based anywhere in the world, and there's no reason as to why you couldn't offer your services to such firms. So being able to be online and be part of the digital revolution, to use a phrase, is uniquely important for us. And it's about economic competitiveness. It's about efficiency in your personal lives. It's about empowerment in your in the way that you approach school, work, etc. And it's incredibly important. And I've only frankly scratched the surface of what it means for us as a region. But that should give you some brief idea of how important it is. Now, there are gaps, and the gaps are both in terms of the fact that people don't have enough service, they can't afford the service, and there are some gaps in terms of people who want the service not having access to it. So there are multiple problems. On one hand, there are people who don't understand the value of being online, who are afraid of it, who are scared of it, who don't want to do any banking online. They're worried that their money is going to get stolen. And that's a problem. And so they don't have an ATM card, or they don't have online banking, and that's impacting their ability to run their farms efficiently, etc. And on the other hand, there are people who want the service but maybe can't afford it. So that gap is hugely consequential for us as countries, and we need to close that gap for all of the reasons I mentioned.
Okay, so part two is sort of
There's a part two?
Yes, there's a part two.
That's a little bit unfair.
So how does ECTEL plan to use the findings from the DIS to ensure people are not left behind in the digital era?
Well, it's very important for us because it gives us important clues as to where we have challenges and where we have issues. So in some countries, for example, the issue isn't price. Actually, people are saying that based on the relative wealth of the country, that the prices that they pay for some services or most services are fair, and that they're okay with that. Obviously, we need to do a job to keep prices under control there, and so that situation remains. But in other countries, affordability is a major consideration. And so ECTEL needs to look at that data to understand what interventions in particular markets are required. So, for example, in a market where a high number of respondents say, I just can't afford to have broadband at home, even though I have children of school age, because it's just so expensive, then ECTEL needs to think about what are the kinds of interventions it can take in order to make sure that there is an affordable package for families, for people of school age, or for just the public at large. In other cases, the data suggests that it's prices aren't the issue; it's availability. In other cases, it's um, a simple issue of poor quality. So the data is going to be used by ECTEL to try to understand and then target specific problems and challenges that we need to address from a regulatory point of view.
Okay. And of course, this can be done in collaboration with the NTRC through the USF project.
Well, the Universal Service Fund projects are going to be important. So to deal with gaps in the network, absolutely. Although, the providers, I have to say, in most cases have done a reasonably good job of providing coverage for most of our markets. There are some areas, there are some countries where the gaps remain, and due to terrain, it's just expensive. So universal service will be a very useful to assist with that. But it's also a combination of things. It's not just universal service. It's not just extending the networks. It's not just providing subsidized packages to individuals and families. Sometimes it might require actual hard regulation. When I say hard regulation, formal regulation in a particular area, for example, quality of service. So we may need, and we will in fact be at some point prescribing the standards that are expected, from networks, so that people don't have to deal with drop calls all the time, so that people know that if you contract with an operator to provide you with a certain amount of speed, that speed should be available a certain amount of the time. And so, yeah, it's a series of things and a series of regulatory interventions that may be required depending on the nature of the problem.
Okay. All right. So spectrum management and emerging technologies continue to evolve rapidly. How is ECTEL preparing the region for innovation such as 5G and AI-driven services?
Well, in terms of 5G, it's important to remember that, all investment in the sector is really driven by the private sector. It's really up to the operators to make the decision to invest in the services and to upgrade their networks to provide the services. Now, we're very interested, obviously, for macroeconomic and public policy reasons in seeing a 5G rollout in the countries. And the governments themselves are looking at a range of policy initiatives to encourage operators to make those investments. So in some countries, I won't mention them specifically, but in some countries, cabinets have, given or committed to giving significant concessions to operators to invest in upgrading their networks. On the regulatory side, the spectrum required is available. So ECTEL's role is to work with the NTRCs and also the operators if they're interested in a particular type of spectrum that would be required to launch 5G services, to make that spectrum available. And of course, we're working very hard to make that process as efficient as possible. We think we're doing some work to make sure that the pricing of that spectrum is also at the right level. And that's a piece of work that, may take a bit of a while. We think it is, but obviously we'll see in time. The proof is in the pudding, as the cliche goes. But it's important that people understand that the launch of 5G services isn't down to ECTEL or the NTRC. It's really up to the operators to see the business case and to make the investments necessary. I think that there is a clear case. There is a business case. I think the markets are ripe for the launch of 5G services, and I think the region, from political point of view, is willing to support the launch of 5G services. So let's see what happens. But I hope that we're going to see some announcements in that area soon.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Cox. So as we approach the 49th Council of Ministers meeting, which is actually scheduled for Friday, February 27th, right here in St. Lucia, tell us about some of the key policy discussions on the agenda.
We'll be reporting to Council on how we did on our work plan last year. We'll be reporting the results of the digital inclusion survey, which was hugely important for them, hugely consequential for them to understand what's happening in their countries in the context of, digital services and access to digital information. We'll also be going to council to get a decision on the strategic plan. So we've developed the strategic plan with the help of consultants. We've worked very closely with the NTRCs and with all of our stakeholders to develop a plan which is forward-looking, which is going to set ECTEL up for the next 25 years, as I said, and now we need it to be formally adopted and approved by the Council of Ministers, which is the highest decision-making body of ECTEL, before we can start implementing it. So we're on the cusp of implementation. We just need that formal approval, and then we begin to start rolling out the specific activities. So those three things, I think, are really important for the Council. One, to understand how ECTEL is doing, how it's using the resources that are entrusted to it to get things done. And so that's the work plan. The second is, as I mentioned, the digital inclusion survey, which is, from a policy point of view, you can imagine very, very informative and very important for our governments. And then finally, as I said, getting the strategic plan approved to get ECTEL on the right track for the next 20 years.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Cox. So on a personal note, how has this role stretched or challenged you as a leader?
In every possible way. And leadership in any context isn't easy. Leading people is always a challenge, and there are always going to be difficulties and nuances and situations which require wisdom and insight and patience. And so, yeah, any situation in which you are responsible for a group of people and getting a group of people from one area to another, getting them to a destination, as it were, is going to be challenging. So, and that's especially true in the context of change. Change is very difficult for institutions, particularly institutions that have been doing things in a particular way for a long time. Any change is going to be difficult for people. It's uncomfortable. None of us like to be taken out of our comfort zone. We want to be comfortable. We like routine, we like predictability, and change is unpredictable. It means that we have to challenge ourselves, sometimes challenge our assumptions, and that's never easy. And that's just human. I would be, if I were not in a position of leadership and the change was being sort of demanded of me by another, I would chafe at it. So all of us have to manage that sort of emotional resistance that we all have as human beings to profound and meaningful change and transformation. But I would say that, yeah, it's slow going and tough going, but it's been extremely rewarding as well. And so I still look forward every day to coming into work. I'm excited to work with the people who are here. I'm excited to see what they can achieve. I think we're incredibly focused on what we have to do, and that makes a difference. Staying focused on what you're trying to achieve is frankly the difference between success and failure. Because if you're distracted easily, if you get pulled into other things very easily, instead of focusing on what's your core mission, what you're really here to do, what you're really trying to do, then you won't succeed. But if you stay focused, everything is within reach, I think.
Okay. All right. So before we go into your closing remarks, it's time for our rapid fire segment. You are my guinea pig with this one. It's the first time doing it, so do not overthink the responses. Just say the first thing that comes to mind.
I will not say the first thing that comes to mind, correct?
Okay, think just a little bit. All right, so for long council or board meetings, coffee or tea?
Long council or coffee?
Coffee. I'm not sure why you hesitated when that's all you drink, but yeah.
True.
So what's one misconception people have about ECTEL?
That we are the ones who can snap our fingers and make things happen. It's important that people recognize that we serve others rather than the other way around. So we serve NTRCs, we serve the governments, and we as an institution just don't have the power authority or ability to simply wake up one morning and decide these prices are too high. We're just going to make you bring them down. It just doesn't work that way. Yeah.
All
So
right.
that's the major thing I think I'd like people to take away from this conversation.
Okay. Spectrum or broadband, which one keeps you up at night and why?
Spectrum, because Spectrum is how we're funded, and we have a huge challenge with Spectrum. I think it's become obvious to me, for example, that although we are an organization that is funded by Spectrum, that we are dependent on the revenues that we raise from literally the sale of Spectrum to operators, that frankly we need far more information, training, understanding of it as an organization than we currently do, and we also probably need more resources in that area. So connectivity and making sure that people get maybe making sure that people get online is something that I think about a lot. But if I'm absolutely honest, I think about Spectrum every day and at 3 in the morning.
Yeah, I knew that would have been the response, but yeah. So if you weren't in telecom regulation, what completely different job would you have?
Oh, that's a hard one. If I weren't in telecom regulation, what
Mhm.
completely different job would I have? Hard to say, to be honest. I think telecom regulation.
Okay. All right, that's fine. I won't pressure you. So I think you mentioned it, but what's one telecom term you wish the public would understand better? Is there another one?
A telecom term?
Yeah.
Um, Let me see. What are the things that well, I don't think people understand spectrum very
Spectrum.
well, yeah.
Yeah.
And the easiest way to think about it is to think about spectrum in the way that we like if you've ever listened to a radio, um, and you understand the basics of how a radio works, then you understand spectrum. And all that means is that when you're listening to a radio, you're literally listening to you're listening to signals which are broadcast over the air from one point, in the country out everywhere else, and it's being broadcast over certain frequencies, and that's the radio station that you tune to in order to listen to that. So spectrum it's actually part of the visible it's part of the freely occurring electromagnetic spectrum. It's radiation that's freely occurring in the atmosphere, and all that happens is that countries, because of the fact that it's a public resource like water or any other resource, countries assert domain over that freely occurring radiation so that they can allow companies to monetize it, to use it for commercial purposes. And that's all that's happening in the context of a sort of a radio station, or even your cell phone. It's really a very sophisticated radio that's receiving signals from another very sophisticated radio using those frequencies. So yeah,
Thanks
and
for
that's all
that.
it is. Yeah.
Okay. So my last rapid fire question is, if ECTEL had a theme song, what would it be?
I think I prefer to go back to the question about what would I do if I were not a
Okay.
telecoms lawyer, because I definitely don't have a theme song.
Okay,
So yeah, no, great questions, but you stumped me completely. No, no,
I did not think that was possible, but that's fine.
stumped me completely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking champion, but that's fine.
I mean, walk like a champion, ram,
Oh,
pa, pa, pam, pam. No,
no, that's okay.
that's a Jamaican
That's
song.
fine. I was thinking champion by Chris Gayle, but that's fine.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so any closing remarks, Mr. Cox?
This has definitely been the strangest and most entertaining interview that I've done probably in my life. But thank you very much, Coretta. You've done a great job, and it's certainly been thought-provoking. I need to do some reflection. I really do need to figure out what would I do if I were not in telecoms. Um, but I just want to say that I just want to assure the public that we hear you. We are aware that people are struggling with the price of their the mobile broadband. When they top up, that many people feel like the service goes away quickly. We understand that people are fed up and have concerns about the quality of service that they're getting for their broadband service at home and elsewhere. And we're not oblivious to that, nor is it a case where we are, where we simply don't care. We do care. We are interested in fixing those problems. What's important to understand is none of those problems admit of easy fixes. They require us to take a very deliberate and very careful and considered approach, so that when we adopt a solution, finally, it's going to be a solution that serves the public interest as well as the interests of the operator, and as well as the interests of the regulator. And that's important because if we don't adopt a sustainable solution to some of the challenges we have, then what happens invariably is the company can't survive, and then we don't have the service. So we need to strike the right balance at a policy and regulatory level, and getting to that point is a bit delicate, but as I say, we're working on it, and we are going to get there. So, I just wanted to sort of let the public know that we hear you, and we're thinking about you every day.
Thanks so much, Mr. Cox, for being our guest on episode 35 of ECTEL Bytes, and we hope to see you again, probably next year, February, around this time. And
if I can help it, but after today. But no, I'm teasing. Thank you very much, Coretta. It was a real pleasure, and I hope anyone who tunes in finds the discussion useful.
Okay. And on behalf of the team, we hope that your tenure at ECTEL will continue to be impactful, and that, as you say, we will serve consumers in a way that's meaningful to them at the end of the day.
That's what it's all about. We're here for the government's established ECTEL. I'll just make this quick point. The government's established ECTEL not for the sake of vanity, not for the sake of governments, not for the sake of public institutions, but for the sake of people, for the sake of the region. And we never forget that. That's just at the core of who we are and why we exist and what we do. And this team is laser focused on people.
Awesome. So in case you joined us late, our special guest was the Managing Director of ECTEL, Mr. David Cox. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below, and we'll be happy to reply. Apart from being on Facebook, this recording will also be on YouTube, which is also at ECTEL, on Instagram, LinkedIn, and X as well. It will be that's at ECTEL Authority, and of course on our website, which is www.ectel.int. So please share this information with persons who may not be on social media. So that's it for episode 35 of ECTEL Bytes. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope to see you again virtually very soon. I'm your host, Coretta Crooks-Charles, ECTEL's Communications and Media Relations Manager. And until next time, do take care and keep safe.